Hello and a very warm welcome to everybody joining us for episode 3 of Inside SA Media. It is of course proudly brought to you by Tribox Media and Fact Fort. Absolutely thrilled to be here with you once more. My name is Lungisonyatywa Onachia and today we are talking about covering corruption. South Africa's probably one of the most important beats, according to me, the political beat. Let's get into it. It starts with a whisper, a leaked email, a tip-off in a parking lot, a file slipped across a desk late at night. Corruption doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it just looks like a smiling official at a press conference or a tender form that is signed just a little bit too hastily. But behind every stolen rand is a broken promise. And behind every single one of those broken promises is a trail that needs to be followed. In South Africa, investigative journalists don't just report stories. They are the ones that penetrate the blind spots of power. They risk their careers, their reputations, and even their lives to uncover what others want to hide. Today we go behind the headlines, into the silence, the retaliation, the reckoning. This is the story of the people who tell these stories, even though there is nothing left at stake. Corruption isn't just an abstract crime. It's a drain on schools, on hospitals, on electricity, on water, and of course on human dignity. And the crazy thing about that is that we can actually measure it. I'm talking 2.1 billion lost in irregular PPE procurements during COVID-19. 255 million spent on a single incomplete Tembisa hospital project with no ICU beds to show for it. In 2021, the Department of Basic Education allocated 7 billion rand to fix pit toilets in schools, yet over 1,400 schools still rely on them. Why? Because contracts are siphoned off to ghost companies or inflated through political connections. In Eskom, for instance, over 36 billion has vanished through dodgy coal contracts and fake supplier invoices. That money could have obviously built power plants or kept lights on during winter. The passenger rail agency, PRASA, spent over 3.5 billion on trains that didn't fit on the country's rail tracks, to a point where many workers were still walking to work while trains rust in storage. Even in social services, the government employees medical scheme GEMS lost over 300 million rand to inflated claims and internal fraud. That's money meant to care for nurses, for teachers and cleaners. This is why journalism matters. This is why investigative journalism specifically matters as much. Investigative reporting takes these numbers and turns them into narratives, into evidence, into change. It's not just information, it's sometimes a survival tool. Let's rewind to long before 1994. Corruption in South Africa didn't begin with padded tenders or luxury homes. It began in secret under apartheid. The National Party government presided over a closed authoritarian state. Massive sums were funneled into covert projects, propaganda arms, military operation in neighboring countries, and the brutal suppression of internal resistance. Corruption was baked into the system. Parliament was a rubber stamp for the executive. Independent media muzzled, and the security laws made it impossible to report on the state's misuse of funds. Some of the most damning scandals of the era included the Muldergate scandal in the late 1970s, when government funds were secretly diverted to buy an English-language newspaper to spread pro-apartheid propaganda. Journalists like Alistair Spark, Yarni Allen, and editors at the Rand Daily Mail pushed back against censorship, often at great personal and professional risk. Spark famously called it government by secrecy. What's crucial to understand is this. The public didn't know the full scale of apartheid corruption until years later because there was no free press to investigate it fully. It wasn't just brutal, this was opaque. Another example is, of course, the Project Barnacle and the Apartheid Secret Fund Network. So by the 1980s, the apartheid regime's grip was starting to slip and its corruption became even more desperate and dangerous. Through covert military operations like Project Barnacle, state security agencies managed to siphon public money to fund assassinations, dirty tricks campaigns, and disinformation across southern Africa. Millions of rands were funneled into what became known as the Secret Fund, which was controlled by the South African Defence Force and National Intelligence Service. The money didn't go to schools or housing, it funded cross-border raids, it funded bribes to foreign journalists, and even attempted to manipulate African liberation movements. Investigative journalism had no access. These operations only came to light during the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, where whistleblowers detailed just how deeply corruption had been embedded in the state security apparatus. A 1986 UN report identified over $1.5 billion in illegal arms deals in just 5 years. Secrecy laws protected these operations, and any journalists who uncovered details risked jail under the Internal Securities Act. It was a set pattern: secrecy, shell companies, and politically protected profiteering. When apartheid fell, South Africa gained a free press, an independent judiciary, and access to information laws. But it also inherited something darker, a playbook for corruption built in the shadows. And within just a few years, that playbook would resurface. Enter the democratic era's first mega scandal, the arms deal. By the late 1990s, South Africa was 6 years into democracy. Expectations were high, and the new government promised transparency, accountability, and of course, service delivery. But behind the scenes, something was brewing: a multi-billion rand weapons procurement plan, soon to be known as simply the arms deal. The government signed contracts worth over 30 billion to buy fighter jets, submarines, and helicopters from European arms manufacturers. Officially, it was to modernize the military. Unofficially, it became the country's first major democratic era corruption scandal. Journalists like Sam Soul, Nick Dowers, and Stefans Brumer of the Mail and Guardian began digging. They uncovered evidence of kickbacks, front companies, and politically connected individuals receiving millions in consultation fees. The trail led to businessman Schabir Shaik and eventually to then Deputy President Jacob Zuma, who was accused of soliciting bribes from a French arms firm. Zuma was fired in 2005 and Schabir Shaik was convicted, but it would take nearly 2 decades before Zuma's own corruption trial, known as the arms deal case, would even begin. The arms deal marked a turning point. Political journalism in South Africa got sharper, bolder, and more forensic. Enter the new generation of watchdogs: amaBhungane, Scorpio, and Daily Maverick, non-profit newsrooms that were dedicated to exposing abuse of power. amaBhungane was formed in 2010 by the same team that had chased the arms deal. They introduced long-form, document-based investigations. They trained young reporters, and they published without fear or favor. Meanwhile, News 24's Scorpio team exposed massive graft in state-owned entities like Eskom and Transnet. Polly van Wyk, Peter Louis Myburgh, and others became household names in journalism. But it wasn't just the journalists evolving. Corruption was getting smarter, using shell companies, digital manipulation, and global bank accounts to hide money. The battle was escalating. While arms deal captured international attention, another scandal was quietly unfolding. A story of diverted public funds, political donations, and a government willing to silence the press. In 2004, Journalists at the Mail and Guardian revealed that the state-owned oil company Petro SA had transferred 11 million rand to a private firm called Imvume Management, just days before Imvume Management made a donation to the ANC's election campaign. The money was originally meant for a fuel supply deal under a Black Economic Empowerment Initiative. But the trail suggested something else. Public money laundered through a politically connected company, then channeled straight into the party's pockets. The story was explosive, but before it could even gain traction, the presidency intervened. They obtained a court interdict to prevent the Mail and Guardian from publishing more details. It was one of the most aggressive legal gags since the end of the apartheid era. For a moment, the old ghosts of censorships seemed to return. Editor Ferial Hafaji and her team fought the ban in court and won. The story went public, but the signal was clear. Even in a democracy, exposing corruption could come at a high cost. Now, Oilgate didn't lead to criminal charges, but it laid bare a new kind of corruption, not just stealing from the state, but blurring the lines between party and state entirely. As political corruption deepened, so did the response. Newsrooms got sharper, sources took bigger risks, and in time, a digital leak would blow the lid off a far bigger machine: state capture. In 2017, amaBhungane and Daily Maverick Scorpio team received a hard drive containing thousands of emails and documents. This was evidence of how the Gupta family, with its close ties to Jacob Zuma, had effectively hijacked state institutions. So, the Gupta leaks revealed cabinet ministers being appointed via email, multi-billion rand contracts routed to Gupta-linked companies, PR firms like Bell Pottinger manipulating racial narratives to distract the public, and media outlets like ANN7 and The New Age used to launder government messaging. These revelations led to resignations, international outrage, and eventually the state capture of inquiry, which was chaired by Justice Raymond Zondo. Judge Zondo's final report praised the role of journalists, saying much of what we know now would have remained hidden without their work. Today, the threats to journalism don't come only from secret deals or shadowy politicians. They come from online mobs, courtroom intimidations, and of course the collapse of safety nets. Journalists, especially women and queer reporters, face coordinated online attacks, death threats, doxing, smears. This is all aimed at silencing them and to punish them for exposing the truth. This isn't random. Some attacks are linked to political actors or digital disinformation networks that are trying to discredit journalists during sensitive investigations. SLAPP suits and legal intimidations. SLAPP suits are strategic lawsuits against public participations. These are court cases that are meant to drain resources and scare journalists off of their stories that they're chasing. Independent outlets like Ground Up, which I absolutely love, Daily Maverick, and News24 have all been targeted by companies or individuals that they've reported on. And it's not just reporters at risk. Whistleblowers, often the source of explosive corruption stories, face the most danger. Think of Babita Deokaran, a senior health official assassinated after exposing irregularities in Gauteng's PPE tenders. Whistleblower protection in South Africa remains weak, and when sources go silent, journalism suffers. Journalism is evolving too. Faced with attacks, newsrooms are adapting, they're collaborating and getting more creative. New platforms like Africa Check and Viewfinder are using data, they're using verification tools and AI to fight back against misinformation. WhatsApp and TikTok are now among South Africa's biggest sources of news. So media literacy actually is now more important than ever because journalists are shifting their formats, okay? They're from explainers to short reels just for them to keep up and to meet the citizens where they are. Media houses that were once in competition are now teaming up and collaborating. Gupta Leaks was just the beginning. Recent investigations like Digital Vibes, Pala Pala, and VIP Protection Unit abuse were exposed through coordinated work between Daily Maverick, News 24, and even international outlets like OCCRP. So what's next? What's beyond this point? As South Africa heads deeper into an era of coalition politics, populist rhetoric, and AI-generated propaganda, the role of journalists becomes more vital. With shrinking budgets, press freedom isn't guaranteed, but it's being fought for every single day. From apartheid spies to Gupta leaks, from gag orders to TikTok disinformation, the battle for truth in South African politics has never stopped. And yet, neither have the journalists. The names change, the tools evolve, but the mission is still the same: to follow the money, question the powerful, and tell the story. Because remember, if no one's watching, the corruption never ends. Thank you for watching today's episode. Absolutely love to hear your thoughts in the comment section, and let's meet next week for the next episode of Inside SA Media with me, Lungiswe Nyawa, on a chair. Goodbye.